What's going on, everybody? It is just Chris, and this is an exciting day. It's a rookie, to celebrate. I want to talk about it was my favorite movie of 2021, and I think it's possibly my favorite sci-fi film in the last 10 years. I know that's a really bold claim. Yeah, before I dive into everything, if you guys are new to the channel and you're just popping on because you saw the title Dune, and you're like, hey, I want to talk about Dune or maybe learn something about Dune. I'm Jesse Swift. This is Flickin' Real, and we're doing a little bit of a trailer breakdown. So we're gonna be bringing the trailer up here. This isn't a reaction. I've already watched the trailer about 12 times today, so missed the opportunity to do a reaction. Want to break down. There's a lot of quick shots in here. There's a lot of things going on. Maybe some possible changes from the book, maybe improvements. And now I've read the first few Dune books, and they are very, very dense. So forgive me if there's some things that, as we're going through the trailer, I don't remember clearly whether or not it's an add-on or if it's directly ripped from the book. But I know enough to be very excited about this, to know what's going on, and to be very stoked on the cast that they have. I mean, let's talk about the newcomers. I mean, before we already had Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, Stellan Skarsgård, you had Dave Bautista, and at one point we had Oscar Isaac and Jason Momoa, but they are, spoiler alert, no longer with us in this franchise for now. If you know some things, you know some things, but we won't spoil too much of what's to come. But there will be a lot of spoilers and references to the first movie while we do this breakdown. So getting back into the new additions, not seen in the trailer, is Christopher Walken as Shaddam Emperor, Emperor Shaddam IV, I believe. And then we have Florence Pugh as his daughter, the Princess Irulan. And then Austin Butler as Fade Routha. It's in the building. So without any further ado, let's get into talking about this trailer. Hey, I got Brendan Marr in the chat saying happy birthday, Jesse. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sean saying happy birthday. Good buddy. We can talk about my birthday. I do appreciate that, but we'll have lots of time to talk about that this Saturday, if you guys didn't already know. Sometime around 1 or 2 p.m. till about 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're going to be doing a birthday stream. So it's going to be fun. We'll do games, and there'll be donation goals, and there'll be some fun guests and stuff. It's just going to be all around really good time. But for now, dude, let's bring up this trailer. I want to talk about it because it's just got to be one of the most goosebumps inducing things I've seen in a while. So boom, here it is. Dune Part 2 trailer. Got notified that this was coming out yesterday, and I got to be honest, I'm going to be absolutely unbearable. I'm going to be feral for this movie for the next several months. So prepare for Dune content. Dune Part 1, of course, directed by Denis Villenueve, won 6 Academy Awards the year it was released, which was the most any movie won that year. Obviously, we had Everything Everywhere All at Once doing better than that this year, but still, much respect to Dune. Got to give it all the love. Mike K popped on to say happy birthday. Thank you, sir. Welcome all the real ones popping in here to A, support the channel, and 2, talk a little Dune. So let's play the trailer here. We're going to try to do it without volume here because we don't want to have this video taken down, but there will be closed caption on here because I want to talk about a little bit of the dialogue and things that's happened. So playing the trailer, obviously the first shot we get here is this beautiful opening shot of the dunes of Arrakis. And we have Paul Atreides and Shani. We're getting a little bit of romantic intrigue. It's something I really wanted to comment on with Denis Villeneuve, with how he's been directing the Dune movies, just from what I can see in this trailer and what happened in the first movie. He's giving so much more purpose and doing a really intentional execution with the female characters. I feel like Lady Jessica has been given more to do, or just given like a more powerful performance that really bleeds through with Rebecca Ferguson. Zendaya's Chani always felt very wooden to me when I was listening to the books, and especially when watching the David Lynch 80s film. There just wasn't a whole lot there. And I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but Florence Pugh as Princess Irulan, again, was somebody that became a little more relevant as the books went on, but in the first initial book, kind of a background character, despite there being a lot of narration from Princess Irulan. But she didn't have a lot to do in the book, and I think they are going to possibly replace some of the importance of the Emperor, Shaddam, played by Christopher Walken again, and give a lot of that attention to Florence Pugh, which, understanding Florence Pugh is a fantastic actress, and that Florence Pugh, she's so hot right now. So that'll be interesting to see, and we'll talk about where some of my thoughts come from in this trailer. But anyways, yes, Arrakis. Nobody films sand like Denis Villenueve. George Lucas, eat your heart out. It is breathtaking. I agree with Paul. And now Paul is talking about a couple things here when he says, when you see sand here, imagine water. He's likely trying to paint a picture to somebody that's lived in a desert their entire lives of what the seas of Caladan, his home planet, looks like, and how it was beautiful, lush, green. And what we saw in the first film was a lot of rain. There was no shortage of water there, and so there's just a completely different look and feel to the planet. But on top of that, on top of trying to paint that picture for Chani and reminiscing of his home planet, a big part of Paul stepping into this role of the messiah of the Fremen as their Muad'Dib, as Usu, if you've read the books, is that he is prophesized to bring not only just peace but life back to Arrakis, to help the sands, change into fields of green and make the planet really live and thrive again. And so that's some of what's going on here. Let me just check, see if there's any comments, any new comments. Fact the Gods, hey, what's up, Bryce? Happy birthday, Jesse. Can't wait for part 2. I know, me either. All right, let's get going. Go a little further. So it talks about diving. Johnny doesn't know what diving is, or swimming. It doesn't exist here. And speaking to Denny's really embellishment on these characters is, despite feeling that there was an importance behind these two characters, I never really bought into the romantic element. Frank Herbert is a very imaginative force, the author of the Dune books, and he did a lot for building this world. But I think some of the parts that really benefit from this live action adaptation is building up the relationships. They're, at least for me, experiencing the Dune stories, the relationships didn't feel like they were fully fleshed out. And I feel like Villeneuve is really taking his opportunity to improve that aspect. And then the things that don't need to be changed is not changing. In fact, he's making them come to life in ways I think a lot of the fans of the material couldn't even imagine. Legendary. All right, so we have the voiceover starts of the Princess Irulan, and we get a shot of them moving. I'm assuming she was already pregnant, but maybe further along now, Lady Jessica, pregnant with the son of Duke Leto and Paul's sister. And she is going to be, not to get into the story too much, but Lady Jessica has ingested a fair amount of spice, and if you remember the hallucinogenic properties of spice, that has an impact on the children born there. So that, combined with the Bene Gesserit bloodline that's been bred into Jessica, that mixed with the child is going to have some interesting results, I'll just say, without getting into too many details. All right, and then Irulan right here is talking about, and I'm looking at, she's holding, I'm wondering if this is a voice recorder, and if it is, that would be a really interesting take, because when I first went through the Dune story, it was on Audible, so I got to hear Princess Irulan a lot, because in the book, so many chapters of the book start with a narration recounting the events of the fall of the Atreides family, the rise of Paul, and all of these are told through the Princess Irulan's perspective. Kind of, she's recounting, she's narrating the story of Dune, and so she might be doing this to capture a piece of history. And the narration makes all the more sense if she has like a voice recorder, right? So it feels like it's kind of reminiscent of the storytelling devices used in the book. Garth popping into the chat saying happy birthday. Thank you, sir. And then Bryce saying, I'm not as familiar with Dune as I should be. I know there are quite a few books. Do you think we'll get more than 2 parts to the series? So, for those of you that don't know, Dune Part 1 and Part 2 are just the first book broken into 2 sections because, again, much like Lord of the Rings, the Dune franchise is very dense with lore and details, and I find it to be impossible to get that really crammed into a 2 hour, 2.5 hour film. Now, if they had a budget for it, it could make a really great series, but they did try on the Sci Fi channel a Children of Dune series that had James McAvoy in it. If you didn't know about that, you can look it up, but it just doesn't quite hold up. So Princess Irulan, she's got a little bit more of a, I won't say villain, but antagonistic role that may not have been as apparent until later in the series, but it looks like they're going to get ahead of it here. All right, the darkest of them all may remain, and they are the Harkonnens are burning all the Atreides bodies, all the fallen soldiers. We have Lady Jessica telling Paul, your father didn't believe in revenge, which is true, but we will see as the story unfolds. Paul is neither his father nor his mother, and Paul, in a lot of ways, Paul Atreides has died, and it is the birth of this new Fremen warlord, messiah, larger than life, godlike character to these people. And this second part is really the story of that rising, that acceptance of this role that Paul is going to step into. And some of that is tackled a little bit further in this trailer. What if Paul Atreides was still alive? So, depending on how many times you have either familiarized yourself with the Dune story or just rewatched the first movie, it can get a little murky or muddled in what really happened. So, just do a recap, right? There are a few large families that are all part of the Imperium, right? The space colonies. And you had the Atreides family who was rising in power, rising in favor with the galaxy, and the Emperor, Emperor Shaddam, who we have only heard of but have not seen yet, was feeling threatened by the rising power of the Atreides. And so what he did is he had the Harkonnens on the planet Arrakis, and they were terrible. They were brutalizing the Fremen. They were taking up the spice, but the Emperor had them placed there. So, as a kind of forced suicide mission for the Atreides, the Emperor commanded them to come take Arrakis from the Harkonnens, and knowing that this would lead to a civil war because he wanted both the Harkonnens and the Atreides could possibly vie for power and take over the Emperor's spot in the Imperium, if you're following me so far. So the Emperor thought the best case scenario would be to have these two large, successful families duke it out, no pun intended, referencing Duke Leto, of course, and at least one of them would be taken out. Now, when he started seeing that the Harkonnens might have the edge, and the Harkonnens were not threatening the Emperor as much, they were loyalists, he gave them all the power that they needed to take out the Atreides family. So when you watch the first movie, and you have not only the Harkonnens, but the Emperor soldiers coming down, the name escaping me, it'll come to me randomly during this, and they wipe out the Atreides, right? And they would be, when Irulan is asking, what if Paul Atreides is still alive? Then he would be a martyr to the galaxy. Then he could spread the word that the Imperium is willing to crush anyone that threatens its power, and they would have a galactic rebellion, looking at you, Star Wars, rise up and revolt against the Emperor. So if any Atreides remained standing, it would be devastating to the Imperium's claim to power. So a lot of that, again, I encourage all of you, if you haven't recently, rewatch the first Denis Villeneuve Dune movie, and watch it with subtitles on. Not because you can't hear it, but there's just a lot of details crammed in there that you can miss if you're not absorbing it all, right? And obviously, I was listening to it, having some of the background knowledge, but it's good to watch with subtitles. Now, I'm going to pop over into the chat really quick to see before we go any further. Um, Mike K says there are 6 books by Frank Herbert's original run. Yes, and sometime after that, I want to say it's Brian Herbert who took over and wrote wrote some of the books, continuing forward and backwards. There's a lot of like history of dunes, and there's things that talk about the mechanical uprising, because there's a lot of background history of Dune. The reason that they have, yes, they have technology in the way of machines, but the reason they don't have AI is because the giant war between artificial intelligence and humans that happened like thousands of years ago before the story started. Again, lots of background knowledge, not things you necessarily need to know to experience Dune, but things that are important in that world, right? Like you don't need to know everything about the Silmarillion to understand Lord of the Rings, but once you do, it kind of adds to the experience. Garth says the Emperor pitted the Jedi against the rebels, basically. Yeah, Garth, you're not wrong. That's actually pretty pretty accurate. And then Frack the Gods Bryce saying, I've literally become accustomed to watching everything with subtitles. I feel like I absorb so much more. 100%, even like comedies and stuff. Ted Lasso. I watch Ted Lasso's with subtitles. I watch Shrinking with subtitles. Everything I watch at home, I watch with subtitles, even if it's my first time watching. Curtis says, happy birthday, Jesse. I wish Dolby or IMAX showing of Dune 2 would have subtitles. I think a smaller theater might. That would be great. If subtitles were more prominent or an option, I think I would do it. And they do have like certain like devices that you can put like on your chairs or something like that have closed captionings, but they're pretty terrible and very very distracting for you and just other people in the theater. So hard to do, but if I could ever get a closed captioning screening on Dolby or IMAX, I would definitely do it. And just a question, it might depend on what theaters you guys have available to you wherever you are at. Do you prefer Dolby or IMAX? I'm a Dolby guy. IMAX is great, at least in theaters around here. The seats are always terrible, and Dolby is better. All right, moving on in the trailer. Now we see, let's go back a shot here. Right after Airline, there we go. Gurney Halleck, originally played by Patrick Stewart in the 80s, of course, but now played by Josh Brolin. A lot of people that weren't familiar with the book were kind of asking, like, what happened to him? We just saw him run into battle. That was the end of it. Well, as you can see, Gurney is alive. Gurney's a fantastic character and will have a very important role to play in the back half of this story. I won't say a whole lot more, but it is good to see a familiar face. And Bryce is saying Dolby over IMAX. I agree. Robert Adams in the chat. Yo, yo, yo. All right. Going on, so we have our first look at Fade Rautha, originally played by Sting in the 80s movie. And no big silver underwear in this one, at least not from what we can see. And then the clips start going by really fast. Here we have Rabban, sorry, played by Dave Bautista. Didn't have a lot to do in the first movie, but he was introduced very early on. He does have a more prominent role. Again, in the second half of the book, we're going to see a lot happen with this character, so keep an eye out there. A lot of probably some fighting. We're going to see him put in charge of a large Harkonnen force, and we're going to see kind of what he does with that and how that goes for him. And then we got Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen out in the sunlight. Nearly died in the last movie, obviously, with Duke Leto's attempt to poison him with the gas that was put in there by Dr. Yue. And yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about him. And we get to see, I love the imagination's really on display when you look at the machinery and the designs, like the ornithopters and just really cool ships and tanks and whatever this is going on, that gun thing. And we have, I'm assuming it's Shani, and then is that Leah Subdu? I cannot pronounce the actress's name. Is playing a character that I know is important to the story, but I can't really remember what she did. It's been a while since I've read the first Dune book. All right, I just love the color scheme here. So that is Sardaukar, I think, that's what I was trying to think. That is the Emperor's soldiers. I think that's Sardaukar. It could also be a Harkonnen just wearing protection, obviously more susceptible to the heat of the sun, being that they are very pale, so they have to protect themselves when going out for an extended visit under the sun. And there we have, that was Austin Butler. There's Rebecca Ferguson, Lady Jessica opening up. Now we have the thumper, the sandworm bait, Shai Hulud, when he's getting ready to take his first ride. And these are some lines taken right out of the book. And I think Javier Bardem as Stilgar is one of my favorite things I've seen Javier do in the last 5 years. Obviously more than Captain Salazar in Pirates of the Caribbean. But yeah, the way he shoots sand in a way that is obviously believably sand, but also there's something very fluid about it and almost liquid. And they did it very well in the first one when we first see the sandworm for the first time. And there's that kind of rattlesnake sound and the sand begins to move and they can't run on it because it's so unsettled. That when Denny was younger and he read this book, he had a very vivid imagination in a way that I couldn't have done because I had a very vague understanding when I was listening to the book. And then when I saw this movie, I was like, yes, that is what all these things should look like. And I think one of the hardest things about adaptations, look at Harry Potter or some of the YA stuff, is it's really hard to capture or match the things that we have in our imaginations because our imaginations are almost always more creative or vivid. But I think Denis Villeneuve has shown that he has more imagination than a lot of us. And the way that it's realized, I would have never imagined. Looking at Garth says, so which Tremors movie is this, 7 or 8? Well, I am wearing my Tremors shirt, just sandworm representing. And this would technically be 9, I think, because there's 7 actual Tremors movies. There's also what's a sci-fi series that Christopher Lloyd appeared in. And yeah, so all those things put together, this is definitely Tremors 8 or 9. If Fade Rautha Harkonnen is pronounced Freya, then I have been saying it wrong since 1984. Fade Rautha, yeah. Anyways, what's Robert saying about Freya? I don't know. Yeah, bald boy. Okay, going on to Riding the Sandworm. He says nothing fancy. I love that they're almost like bat grapple hooks, and they shoot out of there and hook on. And we're getting to see a more cocky, more arrogant, more hopeful Paul Atreides at this point. And I just love the reaction. I'll go back to this for a second. For the reaction of all the Fremen. Look at Stilgar. He is shocked. I think somebody that might have been skeptical before, he is now a full believer of Muad'Dib, of Paul Atreides, as this prophecy fulfilled. There's all the ornithopters. And this is really interesting. I'm wondering if this is a flashback of some kind, or if really on this planet or in this world, or at least the way that's shot, it is completely chromatic. It's all black and white. And it's Fade Rautha getting into this fight, which was very much in the book. That is the first time we meet Fade Rautha. He is an undefeated gladiator of sorts. And he's also the brother of Raban, who is Dave Bautista's character. And I believe nephew to Baron Harkonnen. A lot of stuff happening very fast. Johnny telling Paul, you will never lose me. Their love is clearly blossoming, and hopefully they can make us believe it a little bit more than the book did. Hopping back over the comments. Mispronounce Fade's name is what Robert said. Garth saying, I really hope they play a Beach Boys or Dick Dale surfing song in that scene. I'm going to say the chances are low, but never say zero. And Curtis says, looks like Teen Wolf surfing on top of Styles Vans. Those are all references that I'm sure are relevant that I just don't understand. All right. Here we have, it's hard to see with the covering, but I think that might be Florence Pugh. That might be Princess Irulan. But this looks like Lady Jessica captured, and there is a bunch of Sardaukar guards or soldiers around her. I see a couple dead birds. Just from this context, I'm not entirely sure what that is about. And it looks like Fade is trying to get some smooch on, get some of his Elvis charm in there. And again, I think that's Leah, the actress. And then Chani seeing something terrifying. We don't yet know what that could be. That might be the coming onslaught of the Harkonnens trying to find the Fremen and wipe them out. But what can you do against a giant sandworm? Now, this is really important. Let's get to Lady Jessica here. And she's gone full, Reverend Mother of the Fremen. She says, we gave them something to hope for. Now, this is something that's kind of a little bit controversial in the story, is because she was part of the Bene Gesserit, which is the sisterhood of witches, space witches, for lack of a better term, that put in place this prophecy for the Fremen to kind of fall for and believe, so they could believe that Paul Atreides is the one true one that's going to lead them into the promised lands, so to speak. And she herself has begun to believe that her son really is this, the Kisak Satarak, I believe roughly is how it's pronounced. That may sound like gibberish to you, but that is the Bene Gesserit prophecy. And she is telling Paul, we have given them something to hope for, right? Being that he is the Messiah. And he sees it a little differently because, as he stated in the first movie, he sees himself as a freak that is a genetic experiment from the Bene Gesserit, because the Bene Gesserit typically try to ensure that they only produce girls. You're only allowed to have girls unless you are the chosen one that has the male baby that is destined to be the Kisak Satarak. And she, being Lady Jessica, being accused of being bold, decided that her child was going to be it. And now it turns out that he is extremely powerful in the way of the voice, in the way of the Bene Gesserit teachings. And also now he's part Fremen, he's part Atreides, he's all these things put together. Is he really the chosen one? And Paul snaps back. That's not hope, because in his mind, it's BS, right? And he's worried that maybe he's not enough. He might be leading these people to their death, that this was all very contrived. Looking back in the chat, Garrett said, I like that they replaced Sting with Elvis. There's definitely some ironic, there's something ironic about that. Robert saying, have you seen the 1984 David Lynch Dune? Yes, of course I have. I watched it after I read the book, to my great dismay. And Sean said, Messiah. And then Gareth said, he's the chosen one like Luke, but he's actually a genetic mix-up like Luke. Yeah, the perspective that we're getting right now is that he's the chosen one. He's the Messiah, which is why a lot of people have issues with the story if this is all they've seen so far, because they believe it is the story of a white savior and dealing with that whole complex. Now, without getting into a lot of details of what's to come, I would say just hold off on that. The story might not be what is presented thus far, and there's a lot more that we get to dive into with Paul Atreides, and it might not be everything that we're seeing on the surface, and I'll leave it at that. So Paul screams back at his mom, that's not hope. There's a lot of screaming at Lady Jessica in here, and then we see, man, this is the shot that really gave me chills. Paul walking into, look at all these sigils of Fremen gathered together under Paul. Now, is this a vision like we saw in the first movie, or at this point has he actually gathered this many Fremen to take on the Harkonnens and reclaim Arrakis? That's a question. And then right here we see on the left, very tall, very lanky Austin Butler, Feyd-Rautha, and Paul is repeating the line from Jamis at the end of the first movie when they fought so he could take his place with the Fremens. And Jamis told him, may thy knife chip and shatter. And it did not. He struck, and he struck true, and he took out Jamis. Now, for those of you that don't know the ending of this particular book, I'll leave it to your imagination as far as how this fight goes. But the confidence was great. And look at all those Fremen. Boom, ready to go. Dune Part Two. And just imagine the incredible Hans Zimmer score and singing. Da, 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 dee, da. Okay, so let's just take a look real quick here before we start wrapping this up. Let's look at the cast here. look at the cast. All right, so we have, of course, Austin Butler as Phaedra, Florence Pugh as Princess Irulan, Timothy Chalamet, Paul Atreides, Zendaya as Chani, Rebecca Ferguson is Lady Jessica, and then Christopher Walken as Shaddam IV. I'm a little sad we didn't get anything, but I know we're going to get at least one more trailer, if not two. Stellan Skarsgård, of course. All right. Dave Bautista coming back as Raban, and then Leia Seydoux. I'm vaguely familiar with her, but Margot's not a character that I remember a whole lot about as Margot Finring. And then I'm not sure who Kali is. There's a lot of characters to go by kind of quickly when listening to the book or even reading the book. Javier Bardem obviously doing a really good job as Stilgar. Josh Brolin's back. We get to see more Gaius Helen Mohayim, who was the one at the beginning of Dune Part 1 that had Paul put his hand into that box. So we're definitely going to get some more Bene Gesserit action. Maybe some stuff hinting at the Bene Gesserit spin-off show that we're supposed to be having on HBO Max if that ever gets off the ground. Tim Blake Nelson. Now, I don't know if I remember that he was cast in here, and I wonder what role he could be playing. Thufir Hawat, who was not in a lot of Part 1. He was obviously the Mentat assistant to the Atreides family. They are the human calculators. That's not a detail that was really dived into the film. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's a key role, but it'll be good to see him again. And yeah, so that pretty much wraps up the cast. Let me get brought back up here. Okay, guys, so this is a great time. If you have questions about Dune that you want to throw out there, or let me know what you thought of the trailer. Did you like the first movie? I know in my group of friends it's kind of split. I know some friends that were very bored by it. They thought it was a snooze fest. I'm obsessed with it. Dune is one of my favorite things. In fact, right there, yep, there's the Dune DVD. Yeah, we still have DVDs right next to the Art of Dune book, which is just absolutely gorgeous. And I love, on occasion, listening to the Hans Zimmer Dune soundtrack because it's awesome. Maxwell wishing me a happy birthday. Thank you very much, sir. Garth saying, I love that they have Walken and he's in the Fat Boy Slim music video for Weapon of Choice, which has the lyrics about Dune. Yeah, I think Garth made a reference to that on Twitter here. Guys, if you're not following Garth McMurray on Twitter, please do. He's hilarious and will keep you laughing a lot of the time. And walk without rhythm and it won't affect the worm. If you walk without rhythm, you never learn. Yeah, that's all Dune stuff. So anyways, guys, on HBO Max right now, I believe you can watch Dune. I'm not sure if David Lynch's version is on that, but they're both worth watching in their own rights. Robert says, in our reaction, the second the trailer was over, I made a joke saying that looks boring. It looks pretty good if you like the first one. Yeah, listen, I have a hard time vibing with people that just aren't quite as obsessed with Dune, but that's okay. We all like different things. I know there's a lot of people that still haven't watched The Sandman, and that's the other thing that I've become just grossly obsessed with. So Dune comes out in November, gives you plenty of times to get caught up. Ingest some Dune in your life. If you have Audible and you like going on walks or work doesn't require you to be at attention all the time, you can put some headphones in, listen to Dune. I think that's the best way to ingest it because honestly, it's probably a little bit of a hard read if you're cracking up the book and getting into it because it is quite dense. Maxwell said, I'm excited for the Dune Part 1 photography book coming out in July. Ooh, that sounds gorgeous. And Robert says, they didn't show the money shot of Paul riding the worm. That would have been amazing. I don't know if he's talking about Part 1 because that's all over the trailer. Bryce said Part 1 never came out in theaters, right? This one will. It sure did. I saw it 3 times in theaters, good sir. It was going to go straight to HBO Max, but that was when AT&T was still in charge, and they were just kind of coming out of COVID, and they were being super idiots. So yeah, no, it did come out, and you definitely want to see this in theaters. It is a theatrical experience. It is the most use I've seen made of like IMAX and Dolby in years. You feel this in your bones. But anyways, guys, it's almost 10:40 here, and I do work in the morning, so I just want to take time to say
thanks to everyone who stopped by. Wish me happy birthday. Again, come hang out with me on Saturday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Play some games, hang out with people. It'll be a good time. We'll celebrate my birthday there. But you can always reach out to me on Twitter. Follow me right here at Jesse Swift. Or you can always leave comments on the YouTube channel and talk about Dune. I'm your Dune guy. So how you doing? Anyways, keep it real, guys. And I appreciate you coming through. And until next time, yeah, I'll catch you later.